That Sunday, we toasted mimosas like we were signing a treaty of high society inside the new Silvercrest Country Club. My sister flaunted her membership card as if it were a medal of honor, and my parents looked at her like she had rescued our lineage from obscurity. Then I dropped a quiet bomb. I told them I received an invitation too, but mine was not a guest pass. It bore a royal seal. My name is Caitlin Boyd, and for the last 8 years, I have been invisible in the very room where my family shouts the loudest. The Sunday sun was aggressive that morning, piercing through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Silvercrest Country Club and refracting off the crystal chandeliers in a way that felt calculated. Everything about Silvercrest was new, expensive, and desperate to prove it had a history it did not actually possess. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans, fresh-cut lilies, and the heavy, cloying scent of new money trying to settle into old habits. We were seated at a prime table near the terrace, the kind of spot reserved for people who needed to be seen eating more than they needed the food itself. My sister, Miranda, was the conductor of this orchestra. She sat at the head of the table, her posture rigid, her smile fixed and terrifyingly bright. In her hand, she held a small rectangle of black plastic with gold lettering. She did not just hold it, she displayed it. She rotated it slowly, letting the light catch the embossed letters so that everyone at the table, and perhaps the table over, could read the words, Silvercrest Country Club, full voting membership. She tapped a manicured fingernail against the word full. The sound was a sharp click, like a judge's gavel hitting the sounding block. Full voting rights, Miranda said, her voice dropping an octave to emphasize the gravity of the situation. Do you know how long the wait list is for the social membership alone? 3 years. But this is the inner circle. This is the table where decisions are made. My father, Robert, looked at the card as if it were a grandchild. He reached out, his hand hovering over it before he pulled back, as if afraid he might smudge the sanctity of the plastic. Incredible, he breathed out. Just incredible. Miranda, the Boyds have always been on the periphery. We have always been the ones knocking on the door. But this? You have kicked the door down. It is not just a club. Dad. My brother, Logan, chimed in. He was wearing a polo shirt that probably cost $300, tucked into pants that were too tight, checking his smartwatch every 40 seconds. I was looking at the prospectus. Silvercrest is projecting a membership equity increase of nearly 15% over the next 2 fiscal quarters. This is not just a social expense, it is a tangible asset, the networking potential alone. If you monetize the connections in this room, you are looking at an ROI that beats the S&P 500. Exactly, Miranda said, beaming at Logan. Finally, someone who speaks the language of success. My mother, Elaine, was dabbing at the corner of her eye with a linen napkin, careful not to disturb her eyeliner. I am just so relieved, she said, her voice trembling with a fragile sort of joy. Do you know what Mrs. Gable said to me at the grocery store last week? She asked if we were members of the Oakwood Club. Oakwood! That place has not been relevant since 1995. Now I can tell her. I can tell her my daughter is a voting member at Silvercrest. They raised their mimosa glasses. The champagne fizzed, a sound like tiny, dying applause. To the Boyd family, my father announced, finally arriving where we belong. They clinked glasses. The crystal rang out, a pure, clear note that seemed to cut through the ambient chatter of the dining room. I lifted my glass, let the rim touch my lips, and set it back down without drinking. The orange juice had separated from the champagne, leaving a layer of pulp at the bottom, stagnant and sad. I watched them. I watched the way my father's shoulders relaxed for the first time in years. Thinking a piece of plastic validated his 40 years of middle management mediocrity. I watched my mother scan the room, hungry for eye contact with anyone who might recognize her. I watched Logan calculate the net worth of the man sitting 3 tables away. They measured human worth in access codes and gatekeepers. They believed that value was something you paid an initiation fee to obtain, not something you built with your hands. Miranda took a sip of her drink and set the glass down, her eyes sliding over to me, the warmth instantly drained from her expression, replaced by a pitying, patronizing mask she had perfected somewhere around her sophomore year of college. "Oh, Caitlin," she said. The table went quiet. It was the tone she used when discussing a sick pet or a stain on a silk blouse. "You are being awfully quiet, but I suppose this is all a bit much for you, isn't it?" I looked up from my plate of untouched eggs Benedict. "The eggs are fine, Miranda. The view is nice. No, I mean the context," she said, waving her hand around the room, encompassing the marble floors, the velvet drapes, and the waiters in white jackets. "I know this isn't really your scene. You are so grounded, with your little project." "The Larkspur Learning Alliance," I said. My voice was steady. It was a habit I had developed over years of being the family anomaly. Never raise your voice, never show blood. "Right, that," Miranda said, dismissing the name with a flick of her wrist. "The charity thing. For the disadvantaged children. Is that the term? It is sweet, really, very noble. But I imagine the conversation here is a bit over your head. We are talking about equity and legacy. You are used to asking for handouts, aren't you?" "Grants," I corrected her. "We apply for competitive grants and manage institutional endowments." Logan chuckled, shaking his head. "Same difference. Kate, you are in the business of begging. We are in the business of earning. No offense. But you can't pay a $50,000 initiation fee with good intentions." "He is right, Caitlin," my mother added, her voice soft but lacerating. "We are just so proud of Miranda. She has positioned herself. You have chosen a different path. And that is fine. Someone has to help the poor souls of the world. But you have to understand why this is a big day for the family. We are stepping up." I looked at my mother. I saw the genuine belief in her eyes that she was being kind. She truly believed that by acknowledging my little job, she was being inclusive. She had no idea that Larkspur was currently operating in 3 states. She had no idea that we had just closed a partnership with a tech giant in Silicon Valley to overhaul digital literacy in rural counties. She had no idea, because she never asked. In 8 years, not one person at this table had asked me a single question about my work that didn't involve the words cute or help. "I am happy for you, Miranda," I said, and I meant it. I was happy that she had found the cage she wanted to live in. "It seems like exactly what you wanted." Miranda preened. She picked up the membership card again, tapping it against the table in a rhythmic staccato. "It is just the beginning. The general manager, Mr. Sterling? He came over to greet me personally when we walked in. He told me that with a voting membership, I get priority booking for the venues." She leaned in, lowering her voice as if sharing a state secret. "And he told me about the spring gala." My father sat up straighter. "The spring gala? I thought that was a myth. I heard they haven't held it in 5 years." "They are bringing it back," Miranda whispered, her eyes wide with the thrill of exclusivity. "And it is going to be the event of the decade. Strictly black tie, no press, unless approved by the board. It is the night they announce the new strategic partners for the region. Senators will be there, industry titans, and—" She paused for effect. "It is members only, and their select guests." "Select guests," Logan repeated, savoring the words. "Exactly," Miranda said. "You can't buy a ticket. You have to be invited by a voting member, or be a dignitary. It is the ultimate filter. If you are in that room, you matter. If you are not, well—" She shrugged, a gesture of elegant cruelty. "You are just everyone else." She looked at me then. It was not a look of sisterly affection. It was a look of demarcation. She was drawing a line in the sand, and she was placing me on the other side of it. "I am going to bring Ethan, of course," she said, referencing her husband, who was currently on a business call in the lobby. "And I have 2 guest passes, Mom, Dad, Obviously, you two are coming. Logan, I am working on getting a +1 for you, maybe through the junior committee. She paused, letting the silence stretch out, waiting for me to ask, waiting for me to beg, waiting for me to look at her with the puppy dog eyes of a younger sister who just wanted to be included. Caitlin, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, I would love to squeeze you in, really. But you know how these things are. The dress code alone and the conversation? It is going to be high-level policy and finance. I just don't think you would be comfortable. You would be standing around while everyone talks about the market. It would be boring for you. My mother nodded in agreement. She is right, dear. You remember Cousin Sarah's wedding? You looked so lost during the reception when the uncle from Chicago started talking about real estate. We just want you to be happy. And honestly, this gala it is for people who are players in the city. Players, I repeated. The word tasted like ash. People who make an impact, Miranda clarified. People whose names carry weight. I looked down at my hands. They were clean, unadorned. No rings, no heavy bracelets. Just hands that had spent the last week drafting a 40-page impact report for the Department of Education. Hands that had signed checks for 25 teachers' salaries. I thought about the email sitting in my inbox. I had received it 2 days ago. I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't posted it on social media. I hadn't run through the house screaming. I had simply read it, replied, and continued with my work. But now, sitting here, watching Miranda stroke her plastic card like a talisman, watching my parents gaze at her with a reverence they had never once shown me. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a lock disengaging. I understand, I said softly. I knew you would, Miranda said. Relieved. She reached for the carafe of mimosa to refill her glass. It is just better this way. We can do a family dinner at the Olive Garden next week? Something more your speed. No, I said. My voice was still quiet, but it had a texture to it now. Something hard and unyielding, like granite under velvet. Miranda paused, the carafe hovering over her glass. Excuse me? I said no, I repeated. I looked up and met her eyes. I don't need you to squeeze me in, Miranda, and I don't need a guest pass. The table went silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. Logan looked up from his watch. My father frowned, confused by the tone. Caitlin, don't be difficult, my mother said, a warning in her voice. Miranda is being gracious. I am not being difficult, I said. I am just stating a fact. I don't need a guest pass for the spring gala. I took a breath. The air in the room felt suddenly thin, because I also received an invitation. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. It was as if I had spoken in a foreign language. The concept was so alien to their understanding of the world, and my place in it, that their brains simply refused to process the data. Then, Miranda laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound, devoid of humor. You what? You got an invitation? She shook her head, a smile of pure incredulity plastering itself onto her face. Caitlin, stop. You don't have to lie just because you feel left out. It is pathetic. I am not lying, I said. Then you are confused, Logan said, leaning forward. Maybe you got a flyer? Sometimes they send promotional mailers to the zip codes nearby. Come see our new golf course or something. That is not an invitation to the gala. Kate, that is junk mail. It wasn't a flyer, I said. Oh, please, Miranda scoffed. She set the carafe down with a thud. Do you hear yourself? This is Silvercrest. The gala is for members and distinguished guests. Distinguished. That means CEOs, philanthropists who manage millions, people who shape the city. Who would invite you? And in what capacity? As the coat check girl? My father winced, but he didn't stop her. Miranda, be nice, he muttered. But then he looked at me with that same disappointed exhaustion. Caitlin, honey, why do you do this? Why do you try to compete where you can't? Miranda has worked hard for this status. You have your teaching. Just be proud of her. Don't make up stories." "I am not making up stories," I said. "Then show me," Miranda challenged. She held out her hand, palm up. "If you have an invitation, show me." Was it an email? A text? Did the ghost of the founder visit you in a dream? She looked around the table, inviting them to share in the joke. I mean, really, the club only sends those invitations to people who are actually important. I looked at her outstretched hand. I looked at the smug certainty in her eyes. She was so sure of her world. She was so sure that the walls she had built were high enough to keep me out. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I didn't say a word. I unlocked the screen and opened my email app. I navigated to the flagged folder. There it was, right at the top. I placed the phone in the center of the table, screen facing up, right next to the vase of lilies. The brightness was set to maximum. The image on the screen was crisp and undeniable. It wasn't a generic newsletter. It wasn't a promotional flyer. It was a formal digital letterhead. At the very top, intricate and imposing, was a crest. It wasn't the Silvercrest logo. It was a dual crest. On the left, the Silvercrest emblem. On the right, a heavy golden seal consisting of a lion and a meridian sun, the unmistakable, terrifyingly prestigious seal of the Royal Meridian Philanthropy Office, and below that, in elegant, serif font, the subject line read, "Official Invitation Keynote Request, Ms. Caitlin Boyd." "Read it," I said. My voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence that had descended over our table, it sounded like a thunderclap. Miranda's eyes darted to the screen. I saw her pupils contract. I saw the blood drain from her face as she read the first line, then the second. The smirk didn't just fade, it disintegrated. The air conditioning hummed. A waiter dropped a fork somewhere across the room, but at our table. The world had stopped turning. The hierarchy of the Boyd family, cemented over 30 years of snide comments and Thanksgiving insults, had just developed a hairline fracture. And as Miranda stared at the royal seal glowing on my screen, we both knew that fracture was about to shatter everything. Miranda did not just pick up the phone. She snatched it with the frantic energy of someone trying to defuse a bomb before the timer hit 0. Her manicured nails clicked against the glass screen as she scrolled, her eyes darting back and forth, desperate to find the flaw. She was looking for a typo, a pixelated logo, a sender address that ended in a generic domain, anything that would prove this was a fraud. I watched her face transform. It was a study in slow-motion collapse. The initial sneer of dismissal held for about 3 seconds. Then, as she read the body of the email, her eyebrows knitted together in genuine confusion. By the time she reached the bottom of the screen, the blood had drained from her cheeks, leaving her foundation looking stark and chalky against her skin. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. It was the silence of a woman who had walked onto a stage expecting applause and found only a trapdoor. "This does not make sense," she whispered. She looked up at me, not with respect, but with a kind of accusatory horror. "Keynote speaker? That has to be a mistake. The keynote is usually a senator or a Fortune 500 CEO. Why would they want you?" "Let me see that," my father said, reaching across the table. He took the phone from Miranda's limp hand. He adjusted his reading glasses, squinting at the glowing text. My mother leaned over his shoulder, her pearls clicking against the table edge. "It says she is the primary speaker for the Philanthropy and Future Leaders segment," my father read aloud, his voice sounding hollow. "In partnership with the Royal Meridian Trust and the Silvercrest Board of Directors." He looked up at me, blinking rapidly. "Caitlin, I don't understand. This is a black tie gala. Tickets are $2,000 a plate. Why would they invite you to speak? You run a well. You run a little nonprofit, don't you? A small charity thing?" That word, little, it hung in the air between us, heavy with 8 years of dismissal. "It is not a little charity thing. Dad, I said. I picked up my napkin and unfolded it, laying it across my lap with deliberate slowness. And it is not a soup kitchen. Larkspur Learning Alliance is a scalable educational infrastructure organization. But you help children, my mother stammered, looking at me as if I had suddenly grown a second head. You collect books. You do reading circles. I told Mrs. Gable that you were very sweet with the orphans. We don't work with orphans, Mom, and we don't just collect books, I said. The patience I had maintained for nearly a decade was beginning to thin, revealing the steel beneath. We design digital literacy curriculums for underfunded school districts. We hold government contracts in 3 states. We have a staff of 45 full-time employees and over 200 contractors. Last year, our operating budget exceeded $6 million. The silence that followed was absolute. A waiter arrived to refill our water glasses, sensing the tension, and retreated quickly without a word. Miranda let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. $6 million? Don't be ridiculous. You drive a Honda Civic? Because I reinvest my salary into the organization's growth fund, I replied calmly. And because I don't need a Mercedes to know who I am. Miranda shook her head, her denial forming a protective shell around her ego. No. There is a mistake. It is a common name, Caitlin Boyd. There must be another Caitlin Boyd. Maybe she is a tech heiress or something. They probably mixed up the email addresses. It happens all the time. She turned to her husband, Ethan Cross. Ethan had just returned from the lobby, sliding his phone into his suit pocket. He looked at the frozen tableau of our family, Miranda pale and shaking, my parents looking like deer in headlights, and me, calmly eating a piece of melon. What is going on? Ethan asked, sitting down. Did the kitchen run out of crab? Check her company, Miranda ordered, pointing a trembling finger at me. Right now, check Larkspur Learning Alliance. She claims she is a keynote speaker for the gala. She claims she has a $6 million budget. It is a lie. Ethan, prove it is a lie so we can go back to enjoying our brunch. Ethan frowned, looking from Miranda to me. The gala? That is huge. Caitlin, are you sure? Just check it, Miranda snapped. Ethan pulled his phone back out. He was a man of finance, a hedge fund manager who lived and died by due diligence. He didn't care about the emotional narrative. He cared about the data. His thumbs flew across the screen. Larkspur Learning Alliance, he muttered. Okay, let's see. 501c3 status confirmed. Here is the 990 tax form from last year. He scrolled, and as he scrolled, his posture changed. He stopped slouching. He sat up straight. He swiped down, reading faster. Then he stopped. He looked up at me, and for the first time in the 5 years he had been married to my sister, he actually saw me. Holy cow, Ethan said softly. See? Miranda said triumphantly. It is a shell company, isn't it? Or a scam? No, Miranda, Ethan said, his voice serious. This is legitimate, and it is lean. Their overhead is under 12%. That is unheard of. Caitlin, who sits on your board? Is that the former Deputy Secretary of Education? Yes, I said. Dr. Aris Thorne. He joined us last year after we successfully piloted the Rural Broadband Initiative. And your donor list, Ethan continued, tapping the screen with growing agitation. You have matching grants from the Gates Foundation? And wait, is this the Meridian Trust? They are our newest partner, I said. Hence the invitation. Logan, who had been quiet, finally looked up from his own phone. My brother, the tech bro wannabe who thought success was measured in buzzwords, looked as if someone had just told him the earth was flat. I am looking at your impact report, Logan said. You have standardized evaluation metrics. You are using data analytics to track student retention rates. I thought you just, hugged kids and gave them backpacks. I tried to tell you, I said. I tried to tell you at Thanksgiving, right before you cut me off to explain why cryptocurrency was the future of money. I tried to tell you at Easter, when I brought up our new expansion, and Mom interrupted to ask if the color of the napkins matched the centerpiece. My mother looked stricken. "We didn't interrupt you, dear. We just thought it was a hobby, like when Miranda took up pottery. We didn't want to bore everyone with the details." "A hobby," I repeated. "Mom, I have a master's degree in public policy. I have been published in academic journals. But every time I open my mouth at this table, I am treated like a child showing off a finger painting." "We are proud of you, Caitlin," my father said. But his voice lacked conviction. It was the automatic response of a parent realizing he had bet on the wrong child. "We just didn't know the scope." "You didn't ask," I said. "In 8 years, not once." Miranda was vibrating. The attention had shifted completely. The sun was no longer shining on her membership card. It was shining on my competence. And she could not stand the glare. "So what?" she spat out. "So you have a job. So you tricked some rich people into giving you money. That doesn't make you one of us." "Miranda," Ethan hissed. "Keep your voice down. The Meridian Trust is serious money. If she is connected to them, you do not want to burn that bridge." "I don't care about the bridge," Miranda said, her voice rising. "Look at her, Ethan. Look at her dress. It is off the rack from a department store. Look at her hair. She doesn't even highlight it. She is going to walk onto that stage at the gala and embarrass us. People will ask who she is, and they will find out she is my sister. And they will wonder why I let her out of the house looking like a librarian." She turned to me, her eyes wet with angry tears. "You are doing this on purpose. You waited until today. You waited until I got my membership just to ruin it. You couldn't just let me have this one thing?" "You have everything, Miranda," I said quietly. "You have the approval. You have the house. You have the husband. You have the country club. Why does my success threaten you so much?" "Because it is not real success," she snapped. "Real success is status. Real success is people knowing your name before you walk in the room. You are just labor. You are the help. Caitlin, you are the one who cleans up the messes society makes. You don't sit at the table. You serve it." The cruelty of the statement hung in the air like smoke. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. My father looked down at his plate. Ethan looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to defend me against his wife. Miranda took a breath, smoothing her hair, regaining her composure. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You are smart, Caitlin. I will give you that. And maybe you have fooled these people into thinking you are important. But let's be honest. You don't belong to this world. You don't know the codes. You don't know the games. You are going to walk into that gala, and you are going to be eaten alive. And when you are standing there, alone and awkward, don't come crying to me to save you." I looked at her. I looked at the fear behind her eyes. She wasn't afraid I would fail. She was terrified I would succeed without playing by her rules. For years, I had wanted to belong. I had wanted them to look at me the way they looked at her. I had wanted the "well done" and the "we are proud." I had starved myself of my own accomplishments just to fit into the small box they had built for me. But as I looked at Miranda, clinging to her plastic card as if it were a life raft, I realized something profound. I didn't want their table. I didn't want their membership. And I certainly didn't want their world. "You are right, Miranda," I said. I stood up, picking up my purse. "I don't belong to your world." I looked at my parents, who were staring at me with a mix of guilt and confusion. And thank God for that. I didn't wait for the check. I didn't wait for a goodbye. I turned and walked out of the dining room, past the hostess stand, past the polished mahogany doors, and out into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a follow-up email from the Royal Meridian office, asking for my dietary restrictions for the head table. I got into my Honda Civic, I started the engine, and as I drove away from Silvercrest, leaving my family to their mimosas and their malice, I felt lighter than I had in years. The war had started. They just didn't know that I had already brought the heavy artillery. I thought driving away from the Silvercrest Country Club would be the end of the conversation. I thought that by leaving them in the parking lot with their expensive cars and their shattered assumptions, I had drawn a final, impermeable line, but I had underestimated the sheer gravitational pull of my family's denial. To them, my exit was not a statement of independence. It was a scene in a play where they had lost control of the script, and they could not rest until they had written a new ending. They did not call. They did not text. Instead, they showed up at my office on Monday morning. The headquarters of the Larkspur Learning Alliance was located in a renovated textile mill in the downtown district, a space of exposed brick, steel beams, and the low, constant hum of high-efficiency servers. It was 9 o'clock. My team was already deep into the weekly impact assessment meeting. I was standing in front of the main data wall, a floor-to-ceiling screen displaying real-time usage metrics from our pilot districts. When the receptionist messaged me that my parents and associates were in the lobby, I told her to let them in. I did not stop the meeting. When Miranda, Ethan, and my parents walked into the main bullpen, they looked like time travelers who had taken a wrong turn. Miranda was wearing a sharp, aggressive blazer, ready for a fight. Ethan was carrying a leather portfolio, presumably to take notes on my inevitable fraud. My parents just looked bewildered, their eyes darting from the rows of dual-monitor workstations to the whiteboards covered in coding schematics and logic models. They had expected. I realized with a jolt of dark amusement, a craft room. They had expected glue sticks, piles of donated winter coats, and perhaps a few volunteers sorting canned goods. They were prepared to patronize a soup kitchen. They were not prepared for a tech-forward operational hub. "Take a seat," I said, gesturing to the glass-walled conference room adjacent to the open floor. "I will be with you in 5 minutes. We are just finishing the liquidity analysis for the third quarter." I watched Miranda's jaw tighten. She hated waiting, especially for me. But the environment stripped her of her usual weapons. There were no maitre d's here to impress, no social hierarchy to leverage. There was only work. When I finally joined them, closing the glass door to mute the sound of the office, Ethan was already inspecting the architectural rendering of our new learning lab on the wall. "This is rented, right?" Miranda asked immediately, skipping the pleasantries. "You are renting this space. There is no way a nonprofit pays for this kind of square footage downtown." "We own the building," I said, sitting at the head of the table. "We bought it 3 years ago when the market dipped. It is part of our asset diversification strategy." Ethan turned around slowly. "You own the building? This is a historical conversion. Caitlin, the retrofitting alone must have cost a fortune." $1.2 million, I said. "Fully amortized over the last fiscal cycle." My father made a small, choking sound. $1.2 million? Caitlin, where is this money coming from? This was the moment. The corporate reality. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply slid a bound document across the table toward Ethan. It was our annual State of the Alliance report. Not the glossy version we sent to the public, but the dense, data-heavy version we prepared for institutional audits. "We don't just run after-school programs. Dad," I explained, my voice level and professional. "Larkspur is a scalable educational infrastructure. We build digital learning platforms that can function in low-bandwidth environments. Right now, we are operational in 14 states. We just launched a beta program in 3 provinces in Southeast Asia, and we are in final talks for a rollout in Brazil." Ethan flipped through the pages. His eyes were scanning the numbers with the speed of a predator. I watched him pause on page 10, the operating budget. "7 figures, he muttered. "High 7 figures. And your overhead is—" He looked up, stunned. "This efficiency ratio is better than most tech startups." "We run lean," I said. "We don't spend money on galas. We spend it on code and curriculum." "But the board," Ethan pressed, his finger tracing the list of names on the back cover. "You have the former CEO of Scholastic Systems. You have the chair of the Department of Economics at Yale. These people don't sit on boards for hobbies. No, I said. They sit on boards that change policy. We are not a charity. Ethan, we are a systemic solution. That is why they are here. And that is why we have a clean, unqualified audit from Deloitte for 5 years running. Miranda was silent. She was looking at the office beyond the glass, at the 45 employees, young, driven, and completely indifferent to her presence. She was watching a world where her country club membership meant absolutely nothing. So the invitation, she said, her voice tight. The Royal Meridian thing. It is real. It is real, I confirmed. But why? She demanded. Why you? I looked up the Royal Meridian Philanthropy Office last night. They handle endowments for legitimate royalty. Caitlin, they work with the UN. They don't invite us. They didn't invite us. Miranda, I corrected her gently. They invited me, and they didn't invite me to drink champagne. I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the table. The spring gala at Silvercrest this year has a theme. Did you check what it was? Miranda blinked. It is New Horizons or something. It is just a theme. It means nothing. It means the future of education in a global economy, I said. Silvercrest is trying to rebrand itself as a hub for serious thought leadership, not just golf. The Royal Meridian Philanthropy Office is the primary underwriter for the event. They are launching a massive global initiative to fund educational technology, and they chose Larkspur Learning Alliance as their primary case study. I let the words settle. I am not going as a guest, I said. I am the content. My model, the one you thought was a little charity thing, is the blueprint they are presenting to the room. The billionaires, the senators, the distinguished guests you talked about, they are paying $2,000 a plate to hear me explain how we scale impact without wasting capital. Ethan slowly closed the report. He looked at me with a strange expression, fear mixed with calculation. Who are the backers? He asked. The initial seed money. You never told us. Who is behind this? Is it the Chen family? Is it the Vanderbilt Trust? It is a consortium, I said. Private family offices, venture philanthropy funds. Names, Ethan insisted. I need names. If I'm going to be in the same room with them, I need to know who I am dealing with. You won't know them. Ethan, I said. They are the kind of people who don't put their names on buildings. They are the kind of people who don't need to show a membership card to prove they have power. They just write the check that keeps the lights on. The room fell silent again. The hum of the server room seemed to grow louder. My father, Robert, had been staring at the whiteboard behind me. It was covered in a timeline, a 5-year projection of our growth strategy. He was reading the milestones. Year 1, proof of concept. Year 3, multi-state expansion. Year 5, global integration. He turned to me. His face was slack, his eyes wide with a dawning, painful realization. He looked at the daughter he had dismissed as a dreamer, the girl he had encouraged to find a rich husband because he didn't think she could survive on her own. Caitlin, he asked, his voice cracking slightly, how long have you been doing this? At this level? The question hit me harder than any insult Miranda had ever thrown. It wasn't malicious. It was worse. It was proof of absolute, total neglect. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, but it tasted like bile. 8 years, Dad, I said. We hit our first $1 million in funding 3 years ago. I was featured in the Wall Street Journal last July. It was a half-page profile. You used the paper to pack the Christmas ornaments. My mother let out a small gasp. She remembered the paper. I saw the memory hit her, crumpling up the newsprint, not even glancing at the headline, wrapping it around a glass Santa Claus. We didn't know, my mother whispered. We didn't know. You didn't look, I said. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I just laid the facts out like surgical instruments. Clean, cold, sharp. This was my revenge. Not a scene, but a mirror. I was forcing them to look at the gap between who they thought I was and who I actually was. A gap created entirely by their own arrogance. Miranda stood up abruptly. The movement was jerky, ungraceful. She walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot, her back to us. She was trembling. I knew what she was thinking. The spring gala was supposed to be her coronation. It was supposed to be the night she solidified her place in the Silvercrest hierarchy. She had spent months curating her image, selecting her gown, planning her entrance. She was going to be the new it girl of the club. But now, she realized the truth. She would walk in as a member. Yes, she would have the right dress and the right table, but I would be on the stage. The spotlight would be on me. And every powerful person in that room, the people she was desperate to impress, would be looking at me, listening to me, taking notes on what I had to say in the hierarchy of power. Member is below expert, and expert is below honoree. I stood up as well. I have to get back to work, I said. We have a deployment in 2 hours. You can keep the report. Ethan, it is public record anyway. As they gathered their things, moving with the sluggishness of people in shock, I saw Miranda lean in close to Ethan. She thought I was out of earshot, or perhaps she didn't care anymore. Her voice was a hiss of pure, unadulterated panic. Ethan, she whispered, we have a problem. What? Ethan muttered, still staring at the audit figures. The narrative, Miranda said, clutching his arm. If people find out that Caitlin is my sister, and she is up there receiving an award from the Royal Meridian Trust, while I'm just sitting at table 42. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting toward me with a look of terrified realization. If they know who she is, Miranda whispered, then I am not Miranda Cross. The new voting member, I just become Caitlin Boyd's sister. She looked at me one last time before they walked out the door. It wasn't hatred anymore. It was the crushing realization that she had spent her entire life climbing a ladder, only to find out I had built the building. The silence that followed my revelation at the office did not last long. In fact, it lasted exactly 48 hours. That was apparently the amount of time required for my family to process the shock, recalibrate their denial, and formulate a new strategy. They could no longer dismiss me as the failure of the family, so they decided to do something far more insidious. They decided to annex me. If they could not look down on me, they would claim ownership of my ascent. It started with Miranda. She called me on a Wednesday evening. Her voice pitched in a register of frantic, sisterly concern that usually preceded a request for money or a favor. But this time, she was offering the favor. Caitlin, she said, the background noise suggesting she was speed-walking on a treadmill. I have been thinking nonstop about the gala. I mean, really thinking, and I realized something terrible. You are going to be on stage? That is generally how keynote speeches work. Miranda, I said, putting my phone on speaker so I could continue reviewing a grant proposal. No, you don't understand, she rushed on. You are going to be on stage in front of the Silvercrest board, in front of the Royal Meridian trustees. And let us be honest, sweetie, your wardrobe is functional. It is very nonprofit chic, but it is not gala ready. I am worried you are going to walk out there looking like you are asking for a donation rather than accepting an honor. It affects the family brand, you know? The family brand, I repeated, my pen hovering over the paper. I didn't realize we were a corporation. We are Boyd and Associates in the eyes of society. Caitlin, don't be naive. Look, I have already called my stylist. He has a slot open on Friday. I am going to pay for it. Consider it my apology for the other day. I just want you to look like you belong. I don't want people whispering that you look underprepared. It would break my heart. Her voice was sweet, cloying like syrup that had been left out in the sun too long. But beneath the sugar, I felt the blade. She wasn't offering to help me shine. She was offering to polish me until I reflected her. She wanted to be the architect of my image so that when people applauded, she could lean over to her neighbor and say, I dressed her. I appreciate the offer. Miranda, I said, my voice cool. But I have already arranged my attire, and I am not going for gala ready. I am going as the executive director of a multi-state educational alliance. My image will be just fine." "You are making a mistake," she clipped out, the sweetness vanishing instantly. "You don't know the dress code politics. You are walking into a minefield in flats." "Then I guess I will trigger the mines," I said, and hung up. The next assault came from my mother. She didn't call. She sent a text message so long it required scrolling 3 times. It was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation, referencing my childhood, her prayers, and the unity of the family. She suggested that we all arrive at the gala together, in a single limousine. She wanted a Boyd family entrance. She painted a picture of us walking up the grand staircase of Silvercrest. Arm in arm, a phalanx of success. I read between the lines. They didn't want to walk in with me because they were proud. They wanted to walk in with me because I was the only one with a Royal Meridian clearance. If they arrived with the guest of honor, they weren't just members. They were insiders. They wanted to draft off my slipstream. I didn't reply. I just archived the message. Then came Ethan. My brother-in-law showed up at my apartment building on Thursday night. He didn't come up. He waited in the lobby, intercepting me as I came home from a late strategy session. He was wearing his deal-closing suit, the navy one with the pinstripes that cost more than my first car. "Caitlin," he said, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Got a minute? I promise I won't ask for an audit report." I stopped, shifting my laptop bag to my other shoulder. "I am tired. Ethan, what do you want?" "Opportunity," he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I have been fielding calls all week. Once word got out, and I may have let it slip to a few key players, that you are the keynote. People are interested. I have a couple of guys from a venture capital firm in Boston. Heavy hitters. They are looking for social impact investments to balance their portfolios. They want 5 minutes with you at the gala. Just a handshake, a photo op. I can set it up. We can structure a finder's fee for the alliance. It is free money. Caitlin." I looked at him, and I felt a wave of exhaustion. To Ethan, the gala wasn't a celebration of education. It was a marketplace. He wanted to trade my credibility for social capital. He wanted to use me as bait to hook whales for his own firm. Larkspur doesn't take money from venture capital firms looking for tax write-offs. "Ethan," I said, "we partner with foundations that share our long-term metrics, and I am certainly not turning the Royal Meridian Gala into a networking mixer for your clients." Ethan's smile faltered. "You are being short-sighted. These guys can open doors." "I have the key to the door." "Ethan," I said, stepping around him toward the elevator. "I don't need you to pick the lock." He turned, his face hardening. "You think you are untouchable now? You think because you got one fancy email. You understand how this game is played? You are going to need friends in that room. Caitlin, and right now, you are making enemies." "I prefer honest enemies to fake friends," I said. The elevator doors closed on his scowling face. I thought that was the end of the skirmish. I thought I had successfully parried their attempts to co-opt my moment. I was wrong. I had assumed they would play fair, or at least play loud. I had forgotten that Miranda's preferred method of warfare was silence and sabotage. It happened 3 days later. I was at my desk, finalizing the slide deck for my presentation, when an email pinged into my priority inbox. It was from the Silvercrest Event Committee. The subject line was innocuous. Urgent. Additional compliance verification required. I frowned. I had already submitted my bio, my headshot, and my dietary preferences. I opened the email. "Dear Ms. Boyd, in preparation for the upcoming spring gala, the Membership and Standards Committee has flagged your file for a secondary review. Concerns have been raised regarding the depth of your public profile and potential reputational risks associated with non-vetted speakers. While we understand you are an invitee of the Royal Meridian Trust, Silvercrest policy dictates that all platform speakers must meet specific community standing criteria. Please submit the following within 24 hours. A full list of all personal litigations in the last 10 years. 3 letters of character reference from current Silvercrest voting members. and a notarized statement of financial solvency for your organization. Failure to provide these documents may result in a modification of the program agenda. I stared at the screen. The air in my office seemed to drop 10 degrees. This was not standard procedure. I was not a vendor applying for a contract. I was the honoree. The Royal Meridian Trust had vetted me for months. They had combed through my tax records, my college transcripts, and my social media history before they ever sent the invitation. Silvercrest had no jurisdiction to vet me. I was their guest, not their applicant. Concerns have been raised. The phrase stuck in my throat. Who would raise concerns? Who, within the Silvercrest membership, would even know enough about me to fabricate a reputation risk? There was only one person who had just become a voting member. There was only one person who knew I didn't have 3 letters of character reference from club members because I didn't run in those circles. Miranda. She wasn't trying to get me uninvited. She knew she couldn't overrule the Royal Meridian. She was trying to humiliate me. She was trying to bury me in bureaucracy, to make me scramble, to force me to come to her and beg for one of those character references. She wanted me to panic. She wanted me to call her, crying, asking her to vouch for me. She wanted to be the gatekeeper. I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, but I clamped down on it instantly. Panic was what she wanted. Professionalism was what she would get. I did not reply to Silvercrest. I did not call Miranda. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed the direct line of Lady Margaret Evans, the Director of Philanthropy at the Royal Meridian Trust. We had spoken twice before. Brief, polite conversations about logistics. Ms. Boyd? Lady Margaret's voice was crisp, with an accent that sounded like old money and steel. To what do I owe the pleasure? Is everything prepared for your arrival? The preparation is going well. Lady Margaret, I said, keeping my voice steady. However, I have encountered a slight administrative hurdle that I felt you should be aware of. I just received a request from the Silvercrest Host Committee demanding a secondary financial audit and character references from their own membership base. They intimated that my appearance on the program is contingent on this new vetting process. There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was a very heavy silence. They did what? Lady Margaret asked. The temperature of her voice dropped to absolute 0. They cited concerns regarding reputational risk, I said. I am happy to provide any documentation you need, of course, but I was under the impression that the Trust's vetting process was exhaustive. I wanted to ensure I haven't missed a protocol. You have missed nothing, Ms. Boyd, Lady Margaret said. The Trust selects its honorees. Silvercrest provides the venue. They do not vet our guests, and they certainly do not threaten to modify the program. Did they say where this request originated? They did not, I said. They only mentioned it was an internal flag from the Membership and Standards Committee. I see, Lady Margaret said. Do not reply to that email. Caitlin, do not send them a single sheet of paper. I will handle this. We do not tolerate petty fiefdoms interfering with our work. Give me 10 minutes. I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had just launched a tactical nuke. 12 minutes later, my phone rang. It was not Lady Margaret. It was the general manager of Silvercrest, Mr. Sterling, the man Miranda had bragged about meeting. Mrs. Boyd, he sounded breathless, as if he had just run up a flight of stairs. Please accept my sincerest apologies. There was a miscommunication in our clerical department. An automated flag was triggered in error. We have the utmost respect for the Larkspur Alliance. The email you received was a mistake. Please disregard it entirely. I understand. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice pleasant and detached. These systems can be glitchy. I trust there will be no further issues with my credentials? None at all, he rushed to assure me. We are honored to have you. Truly, I will personally oversee your check-in. He hung up. I set the phone down. An automated flag. We both knew that was a lie. Computers didn't ask for 3 character references from voting members. That was a human request. That was a specific, targeted attack designed to exploit my lack of social connections within the club. That evening, I got the confirmation I didn't need but definitely wanted. My brother Logan called me. It was late, past 10 o'clock. "Hey," Logan said. He sounded weird, subdued, not his usual confident, crypto bro self. "Hey, Logan, what is up?" "I just wanted to say good luck," he said. "For the gala. I mean, really, good luck." "Thanks," I said. Surprised? "Is that all?" "No," he hesitated. "I was at Miranda's house today. I went over to drop off some golf clubs for Ethan. She was on the phone. She didn't hear me come in. I waited. I could hear him breathing on the other end. She was talking to someone on the club committee," Logan said quietly. "She was telling them that your organization was under investigation. She said she heard rumors that you were mismanaging funds. She told them they needed to protect the club's liability." I closed my eyes. Hearing it confirmed was different than suspecting it. It was colder. My own sister had tried to frame me for embezzlement, just to keep me off a stage. "She lied, Logan," I said. "I know," Logan said. "I know she lied. I saw your audit, remember? You are cleaner than the Vatican. I just didn't think she would go that far. I thought she was just jealous. But this is trying to destroy you. Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because," Logan said, his voice cracking. "Because when she got off the phone, she looked happy. She looked relieved, and it creeped me out. I just thought you should know. Watch your back. Kate." "Thank you, Logan," I said softly. I hung up the phone and walked to my window. I looked out at the city lights. Miranda had made her move. She had tried to cut my legs out from under me before I could even stand up. She had escalated from insults to professional sabotage. She wanted a war? Fine. But I wasn't going to fight her with rumors or petty phone calls. I was going to fight her with the truth. I opened my laptop and composed an email to my legal team at the Alliance. I asked them to prepare a transparent financial disclosure packet, one that highlighted every single donor interaction in the last 12 months. I also asked them to flag any potential conflicts of interest with local financial firms. If Miranda wanted to talk about liability and risk, I would make sure the spotlight on the gala stage was so bright that it illuminated every shadow in the room. I wasn't going to expose her. I was going to be so blindingly excellent, so unimpeachably correct, that her darkness would expose itself. The game of psychological chess had begun. She had moved her pawn, but she had forgotten that I was the one designing the board. The email that nearly derailed my career did not come from a verified address. It arrived in the inbox of the Silvercrest Board of Directors at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, sent from a Proton Mail account designed to be untraceable. I only saw it because Mr. Sterling, the general manager who was now terrified of offending the Royal Meridian Trust, forwarded it to me with a subject line that simply read, "For your eyes only, it was a masterclass in corporate sabotage." The anonymous author did not scream or use exclamation points. Instead, they used the dry bureaucratic language of concern. They claimed to be a worried former employee who had witnessed irregular allocation of overhead funds and questionable procurement contracts within the Larkspur Learning Alliance. They suggested that my appearance at the gala would bring undue scrutiny to the club's financial reputation. It was a lie, but it was a dangerous lie. In the nonprofit world, an accusation of financial mismanagement is like an accusation of arson, even if you prove you didn't light the match. The smell of smoke never quite leaves your clothes. I did not panic. Panic is for people who have something to hide. Instead, I called Marcus, my general counsel. Marcus was a man who viewed litigation as a contact sport. We met in the small, glass-walled conference room at the back of the Larkspur office. I slid the printed email across the table. He read it once, his face impassive, and then set it down. "This is not a whistleblower," Marcus said, his voice low and gravelly. "A whistleblower provides dates, amounts, and specific project codes. This uses generalities, irregular allocation, questionable contracts. This is someone who knows the vocabulary of a scandal but lacks the data to build one." It was sent to the Silvercrest board. I said. The goal wasn't to trigger an audit. The goal was to trigger a pause. They wanted the club to get cold feet and rescind the invitation quietly. We can trace the IP, Marcus suggested. It is likely a VPN, but people get sloppy. No, I said firmly. If we launch a cyber investigation, it looks defensive. We do not fight this in the mud. We fight it with transparency. I want a full forensic timeline of every dollar that has moved through this organization in the last 24 months. I want it ready to hand over to Royal Meridian if they ask. We do not hide. We flood them with sunlight. Marcus nodded and went to work. But as his team began the internal review, pulling every donor agreement and vendor contract from the last fiscal year to ensure we were bulletproof, they found something I had not expected. It wasn't an error. It was a trap. Late Thursday afternoon, Marcus walked into my office. He was not holding the anonymous email this time. He was holding a donor agreement that had been sitting in our pending approval queue for 2 weeks. "Caitlin," he said, sitting down without asking, "do you know a company called Apex Horizon Solutions?" "No," I said. "Why?" "They pledged a $50,000 donation to the Alliance last week," Marcus said. "It came in through a referral. The paperwork looked standard, but because we are on high alert, I ran a deep background check on their incorporation documents." He placed a sheet of paper on my desk. It was a corporate filing from Delaware. "Apex Horizon is a shell entity," Marcus explained. "It was incorporated 3 months ago. It has no website, no employees, and no product. But its registered agent is a law firm in downtown Chicago. The same law firm that handles the private equity structuring for Cross & Partners. Cross & Partners. Ethan's firm." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "Ethan is trying to donate $50,000 to me?" "Not Ethan," Marcus corrected. "Ethan is the broker. I dug a little deeper. Apex Horizon is a front for a mid-sized educational software company that has been trying to get a contract with the State Board of Education for 2 years. Their software is subpar, and they have been flagged for privacy violations. If Larkspur accepts this donation, we are technically endorsing them. And since we advise the State Board on digital curriculum, then it looks like pay to play." I finished the sentence, feeling sick. "If I take the money, and then they get the contract, it looks like I was bribed." "Exactly," Marcus said. "And who do you think promised them that access?" I didn't need to guess. Ethan had been bragging about his connections. He was selling access to me. He was using the gala and my sudden rise in prominence. To close a deal for a shady software vendor, he needed me to be the good face that washed their dirty money clean. This was the reputational risk Miranda had warned about. But it wasn't coming from me. It was coming from her husband. I acted immediately. I told Marcus to formally reject the donation from Apex Horizon, citing a conflict of interest with our vetting standards. We sent the rejection letter at 4 o'clock. By 6 o'clock, my phone was ringing. It was Ethan. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Then he texted, "We need to talk. Now. Mom and Dad's house." I drove to my parents' house not because he summoned me, but because I wanted to see his face when he realized I wasn't a pawn. He could move across his board. When I walked into the living room, the atmosphere was suffocating. My mother was arranging flowers in a vase with trembling hands, a sure sign that people had been yelling. Miranda was sitting on the sofa, arms crossed, looking furious. Ethan was pacing the rug, his tie loosened, his face a mottled red. My father, Robert, was sitting in his armchair, holding a glass of scotch. He wasn't drinking it, he was just holding it, watching Ethan pace. "You rejected the check," Ethan said the moment I walked in. He didn't say hello. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "I had that deal locked, Caitlin. I rejected a bribe. Ethan," I said calmly, placing my keys on the side table. "Apex Horizon is a liability. Their software violates 3 different student privacy statutes. If I took their money, I would lose my standing with the Department of Education. Did you really think I wouldn't check?" "It is $50,000, Ethan shouted. "For your little charity. You should be grateful anyone wants to give you money. Who cares about the software? You just take the check. You shake their hand at the gala, and you move on. That is how the world works. That is how your world works, I said. In my world, we have ethics. Oh, grow up, Miranda snapped from the couch. Stop acting like you are some kind of saint. Ethan was trying to help you. He was bringing you a major donor. That is called networking. Caitlin. It is what adults do. You are making a huge scene over nothing just to feel superior. Networking is introducing people, I said, turning to my sister. Laundering a reputation for a failing company in exchange for a kickback is not networking. It is corruption, and I will not let you turn the Larkspur Alliance into a washing machine for Ethan's bad deals. Ethan stopped pacing. He walked up to me, stepping into my personal space. He used his height to try and intimidate me, a tactic that might have worked when I was 20, but meant nothing to me now. You listen to me, he hissed. I promised those guys a face-to-face. I promised them you would mention their initiative in your speech. If you don't fix this, if you don't take that check, I look like an idiot. I lose leverage. Then you should not have sold something you do not own, I said, holding his gaze. I am not your asset. Ethan, I am not a line item in your portfolio. I can make things very difficult for you, Ethan threatened. I know people on the Silvercrest board. I can have your invitation revoked. No, I said softly. You can't, because if you try, I will forward the Apex Horizon paperwork to the Royal Meridian Compliance Officer, and I will explain exactly why your husband and wife team is so interested in my funding sources. Ethan froze. The color drained from his face. He knew exactly what that meant. Royal Meridian didn't just have money. They had legal teams that could dismantle a hedge fund manager's career before lunch. The room went silent. Ethan, my father's voice cut through the tension. It was quiet, but it had a weight I hadn't heard in years. We all turned. Robert was looking at his son-in-law. For years. My father had looked at Ethan with adoration. He had seen the suits, the cars, the country club membership, and he had seen the son he always wanted. He had ignored the arrogance because he thought it was just the perfume of success. But now, he was looking at a man who had just admitted to trying to compromise his daughter's integrity for a commission fee. Did you really try to use your sister-in-law to close a side deal? My father asked. It is business, Robert, Ethan said, waving his hand dismissively. You know how it is. You scratch my back. I scratch yours. She is not a back to be scratched, my father said. He set his glass down. She is building something real, and you asked her to risk it so you could look good to some software vendors? I was helping her, Ethan insisted. No, my father said. He stood up slowly. You were using her, and frankly, it smells desperate. The word hung in the air, desperate. Ethan looked as if he had been slapped. Miranda gasped. Dad, how can you say that? Ethan is the most successful man you know. Is he? My father asked. He looked at me, then back at Ethan. Because from where I am sitting, Caitlin is the one holding the line, and Ethan looks like a man who is afraid the music is about to stop. Ethan grabbed his jacket. We are leaving, he barked at Miranda. I don't have to listen to this. Miranda scrambled up, grabbing her purse. She looked at me with pure venom. You happy now? She whispered. You tore this family apart. I didn't tear anything, I said. I just turned on the lights. They stormed out. The front door slammed, shaking the frame. My mother sat down heavily on the sofa, looking between me and my father. I just wanted us all to go to the gala together, she whispered. Why does everything have to be so complicated? Because, my father said, looking at the door where Ethan had exited, we have been simplifying the wrong things for too long. I stayed for tea. But the mood was somber. My father didn't apologize to me. He wasn't ready for that yet. But when I left, he walked me to my car. He didn't talk about the gala. He didn't talk about the club. He just told me to drive safely. It was a small thing, but it was a crack in the ice. When I got back to my apartment, it was nearly midnight. I was exhausted. My adrenaline was crashing, leaving me feeling hollowed out. I sat on my couch and opened my laptop to check my email one last time, expecting nothing but spam. There was one new message. It was from the Royal Meridian Philanthropy Office. But it wasn't a newsletter, and it wasn't a logistical update. It was from the personal desk of the director, marked with high importance. Dear Ms. Boyd, regarding the upcoming gala, it has come to our attention that there have been several unusual inquiries regarding the financial structure of the Larkspur Alliance, as well as third-party attempts to influence your donor intake. We take the integrity of our honorees very seriously. We request a private audience with you 2 hours prior to the main event. Please come alone to the Clarendon Suite at Silvercrest. We need to discuss the future of our partnership in light of these recent developments. Sincerely, Lady Margaret Evans. I stared at the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. The wording was ambiguous. In light of these recent developments, did they know I had blocked the donation? Or did they think I was part of the scheme? Had I saved myself? Or had the mud Ethan threw finally stuck? I closed the laptop. The room was dark. The silence of the city outside felt heavy. I had won the battle with my family. But as I looked at the royal seal on the screen, I realized the war was far from over. I had 48 hours to find out if I was walking into a coronation or an execution. The silence in my apartment after reading Lady Margaret's email was heavy. But for the first time in a decade, it did not feel lonely. It felt like the quiet before a verdict. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the screen fading, and I found myself drifting back. Not to the recent fight with Ethan, or the shock on my father's face, but to the slow, grinding erosion of the last 8 years. People think revenge stories are born from a single explosion, a dramatic betrayal that shatters the world in an instant. But they are not. They are born from 1,000 tiny cuts. They are born from the way people look past you at a dinner party. They are born from the silence that falls when you talk about your passion, followed by the immediate, loud pivot to someone else's paycheck. I remembered the Christmas of 2018. I had just secured the first major state grant for Larkspur. It was a breakthrough moment. I had spent 6 months sleeping on a futon in the office, writing grant narratives until my fingers cramped. I arrived at my parents' house, exhausted but glowing, holding a bottle of wine to celebrate. I walked in, and before I could even take off my coat, my mother, Elaine, grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a group of her friends, women with stiff hair and diamonds that caught the light like cold stars. "And this is Caitlin," my mother had said, her voice dropping a register, as if she were apologizing. "She is still finding her footing, but she is so sweet. She just loves children. She volunteers for a little group downtown." She loves children. The phrase tasted like ash in my mouth. It stripped away my master's degree in public policy. It erased the complex data modeling I did daily. It reduced my career, my life's work, to a biological instinct, to them. I wasn't a CEO or a director. I was a glorified babysitter who hadn't figured out how to get a real job. I remembered trying to correct her. "Actually, Mom, we just secured a federal contract for digital literacy." But the women had already turned away. They were asking Miranda about her new kitchen remodel. The quartz countertops were more interesting than my federal contract. The countertops had a price tag they understood. My work had value they could not calculate. So they rounded it down to 0. I sat on my couch, pulling a throw blanket around my shoulders, and the memories kept coming, unbidden and sharp. I remembered the time I asked for help. It was 4 years ago. We were in a cash flow crunch at the Alliance. The state reimbursement checks were late, as they always are, and I had 3 staff members who needed to pay rent. I didn't take a salary that month, but it wasn't enough. I swallowed my pride and went to my family. I didn't ask for a handout. I asked for a bridge loan. I had a repayment plan drawn up. I brought a binder. We were sitting on the patio. Miranda was drinking an iced tea, wearing sunglasses that cost more than my car insurance. I laid out the situation. I explained that it was a temporary liquidity issue. Miranda hadn't even looked at the binder. She just laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound, like ice hitting glass. "Oh, Caitlin," she had said, shaking her head. "You really think money just falls from the sky? You play at being a business owner, but you don't understand the first thing about risk. If you can't make payroll, maybe you should shut it down. Get a corporate job. Stop pretending your hobby is a career." She had just bought a second boat that week, a boat they used 3 times a summer. I didn't argue. I packed up my binder. I went to a credit union the next day and took out a personal loan with an interest rate that made my stomach churn. I paid my staff. I ate ramen for 3 months, and I never asked them for a single cent again. But that was the moment the steel entered my spine. That was the moment I realized that their definition of success was a fortress designed to keep people like me out. They thought I did this work because I was soft. They thought I was charitable, because I lacked the killer instinct to be wealthy. They were wrong. I didn't build Larkspur because I was nice. I built it because I was angry. I closed my eyes and thought about the reason why. They had forgotten. Or maybe they never cared to remember. But I wasn't always the invisible sister. When I was 17, I was the girl who almost didn't go to college. Dad's investments had taken a hit during the recession. The college fund was gone. Miranda was already finishing school, so her tuition was paid. But for me, there was nothing. I remembered the panic, the feeling of doors closing all around me, and then the letter came. It wasn't a lot of money. It was a scholarship from a local foundation I had never heard of. $5,000 a semester, just enough to cover the gap, just enough to let me enroll. That money didn't fall from the sky. It came from a system. It came from people who had built a mechanism to find talent and support it. That check didn't just buy me textbooks, it bought me a future. It taught me that opportunity shouldn't be an accident. It shouldn't depend on whether your father's stock portfolio is having a good year. That was why I built Larkspur. I wanted to industrialize luck. I wanted to build a machine that manufactured second chances for kids who had nothing but potential. My team understood that. Sarah, my operations director, who worked 60-hour weeks for half the salary she could get at Amazon. David, my lead developer, who wrote code on a laptop held together with duct tape. They didn't need a country club membership to know they mattered. We had a different kind of currency. We slept well at night. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Pulling me back to the present, it was Logan. I hesitated, then picked up. "I am outside," he said. His voice sounded stripped of its usual bravado. "Can I come up? I brought tacos. I figured you probably haven't eaten." I buzzed him in. When Logan walked into my apartment, he looked smaller. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was in jeans and a t-shirt, looking like the little brother I used to play video games with before he discovered the stock market. He set the bag of food on the counter. He didn't look at me. He looked around my apartment, at the books stacked on the floor, the whiteboard covered in strategy notes, the simple, functional furniture. "I used to make fun of this place," he said quietly. In my head, I used to come here and think, "Man, Caitlin really lost the game. I compared your square footage to Miranda's foyer, and I gave you a score." "I know." "Logan," I said. "I am sorry," he said. He turned to face me, and his eyes were red. "I am so sorry. Kate, I have been measuring people with a ruler that is completely broken. I sat there at brunch, listening to Miranda brag about a piece of plastic, and I thought she was winning. And then I saw your audit. I saw what you built. You are managing a verified impact portfolio, and I am over here chasing meme stocks and pretending to be a CEO. You are good at what you do." "Logan," I said gently. "I am good at pretending," he corrected. "You are good at doing. There is a difference." He sat down on a bar stool and put his head in his hands. "Mom and Dad are a mess. By the way, Dad hasn't spoken since we left his house. He just sits in his study." I didn't have to wait long to find out what my father was thinking. 30 minutes after Logan left, my phone rang again. It was my father. "Caitlin," he said. His voice was raspy, old. "Hi, Dad." "I read the article," he he said. "The one in the Wall Street Journal. I went to the library archives today. I found it." I stopped breathing for a second. He had gone to the library? "It was a good article," he said. "They called you a visionary for the new economy. A visionary." He paused, and I could hear the sound of ice shifting in a glass. "I spent 40 years trying to get into Silvercrest," he said. 40 years. I thought if I could just get that membership, it would mean I had made it. It would mean the Boyd name meant something. I pushed you. I pushed Miranda. I wanted you to be in that world so badly. I know you did. Dad. I was looking up," he whispered. "I was always looking up at the people above me. Trying to climb. I never looked sideways. I never looked at what was right next to me." He took a shaky breath. "I was proud of the wrong things, Caitlin. I was proud of the shine, not the medal. And I'm sorry I didn't see the gold until a stranger sent you an invitation." I closed my eyes, tears finally leaking out. That was the sentence, the one I had waited 8 years to hear. I was proud of the wrong things. "Thank you, Dad," I whispered. "You be careful," he added, his voice hardening slightly. "Miranda, she is not taking this well. She called me an hour ago. She is spiraling. She feels the ground moving. And you know how your sister gets when she loses her footing." "I know," I said. "She grabs onto anything she can to pull herself back up. She grabs onto people to pull them down," he corrected. "Watch yourself." We hung up. The emotional payoff was there. The apology, the validation. But it didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like the calm before the storm. Because Miranda was not like Logan. She didn't have the capacity for self-reflection. She only had the capacity for self-preservation. And right now, her self-preservation required my destruction. I opened my laptop one last time. A notification popped up from the Silvercrest member portal. A public link that had just gone live. Spring Gala. V. IP. Guest list and honoree biographies. Coming tomorrow at noon. I stared at the countdown clock on the screen. Tomorrow at noon. The names would be public. My bio, the real one, with the Royal Meridian seal and the list of my accomplishments, would be sent to every member of the club. It would be sent to the local press. It would be sent to the very people Miranda had spent years trying to impress. Once that list was out, the narrative was locked. Everyone would know who the real success story in the Boyd family was. Miranda would be stripped of her role as the golden child. She would just be the sister of the keynote speaker. She had 12 hours. She knew the schedule. She knew the stakes. And I knew, with a certainty that made my blood run cold, that she would not spend those 12 hours sleeping. She would spend them trying to find a match to burn the whole thing down before the curtain could even rise. I wasn't the invisible sister anymore. I was the target. And the gala was no longer a party. It was a deadline. The publication of the guest list did not silence the whispers. It weaponized them. The Silvercrest Country Club hosted a welcome mixer for local honorees on Wednesday evening. It was supposed to be a casual affair, a chance for the community to mingle before the black tie formality of the gala itself. I had debated not going. My instinct was to stay in my office, buried in impact reports and code reviews, safe in the world where logic dictated outcomes. But hiding would look like guilt, and I was done apologizing for existing. When I walked into the Oak Room, wearing a simple navy dress that I had bought on sale, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. It was subtle at first, a pause in conversation here, a lingering stare there. But as I moved toward the sparkling water station, I caught the tail end of a sentence from a group of women standing near the French doors. "Well, you know how these things work," one woman was saying, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry, "It is never really about the charity work. It is about who you know on the board. I heard she used to date the son of a trustee. That is the only way a girl from nowhere gets top billing over a senator." I recognized the voice. It was Sheila Vanderhoven, Miranda's best friend and the treasurer of the club's social committee. Sheila was a woman who treated gossip like currency and spent it lavishly. Miranda was standing right next to her, sipping a Cosmopolitan. She saw me. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just raised her eyebrows slightly. As if watching a car crash she had personally engineered, they had pivoted. Since they could not attack my credentials, which were now public record, they were attacking the mechanism of my success. If I was successful, it had to be because I had cheated. It had to be a favor. It had to be a backstage arrangement. I poured my water and turned around. Intending to find a quiet corner, Sheila stepped into my path. "Caitlin," she cooed, her smile stretching tight across her face. "We were just talking about you. It is so fascinating. The Royal Meridian thing. Miranda tells us you have been working on this little project for years. It is amazing what kind of doors open when you have the right, shall we say, private connections." A circle began to form. These women smelled blood. They were the gatekeepers of Silvercrest, and they did not like that someone had jumped the fence. "It is not a private connection. Sheila," I said, keeping my voice pleasant but firm. "It is a merit-based selection. The Trust reviewed 400 organizations before selecting Larkspur." 400, Sheila repeated, looking around at her friends with a skeptical smirk. "That is a lot of reading, but tell me, dear, because we are all just dying to know. How does a tiny nonprofit in a renovated mill actually handle that kind of money? I mean, who is really managing the books? We would hate to see the Boyd family embarrassed by an accounting oversight." She let the word hang there. Oversight. It was a polite word for embezzlement. Miranda took a sip of her drink, watching me over the rim. She was letting her attack dog do the work. "That is a great question. Sheila," I said. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us so she had to look up at me. "I am glad you are interested in fiscal compliance. Larkspur operates on a modified zero-based budgeting system. Our administrative overhead is capped at 11%, which is 6 points below the industry standard. We undergo quarterly independent audits by Deloitte, and our last 3 990 tax filings are available on our website right now. Would you like me to send you the link? You can check our liquidity ratios yourself." Sheila blinked. She opened her mouth, but the snappy comeback didn't materialize. She knew how to discuss rumors. She did not know how to discuss liquidity ratios. "And regarding the funding," I continued, addressing the wider circle now, "we don't rely on private favors. We rely on multi-year federal grants that require a congressional review for approval. So unless you are implying that I have seduced the entire Department of Education, I think we can assume the vetting was thorough." A few people nearby chuckled. Sheila's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. She took a step back, muttering something about needing a fresh napkin. I looked at Miranda. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked furious. I had just used the one language they claimed to speak, money, to silence them. But the assault wasn't over. It was just shifting fronts. Half an hour later, I was cornered near the buffet by Ethan. He wasn't alone. He was with 2 men in expensive suits who looked like they sold timeshares on the moon. "Caitlin!" Ethan boomed, grabbing my shoulder with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. "There she is, the star of the hour. Gentlemen, this is her, my sister-in-law, the brain behind the operation." He turned to me, his eyes manic. "Caitlin, I want you to meet the team from EduStream. They are flying in from Silicon Valley just for the gala." "Nice to meet you," one of the men said, extending a hand. His grip was wet. "We are huge fans. We think there is a massive synergy here. We are looking to get our tablets into the hands of your students. We have a new app, gamified learning, very sticky engagement numbers." "Sticky engagement," I repeated. "You mean addictive?" "We mean high retention," the man corrected smoothly. "Look, here is the pitch. We donate 500 units to your schools. You put our logo on the login screen, and in exchange, we get access to the user behavior data for product development. It is a win-win. You get hardware. We get the algorithm training." I pulled my hand back. I looked at Ethan. He was nodding encouragingly, as if he had just handed me a winning lottery ticket. "You want to mine data from underprivileged children," I said flatly. "Anonymized data," the man said quickly. Mostly, no, I said. Caitlin, don't be rash, Ethan hissed, leaning in. This is a 6-figure in-kind donation. It looks great on the books. It looks like exploitation, I said. Our privacy charter strictly forbids commercial data mining of minors. If I accepted these tablets, I would lose my federal funding within a week. Did you even read our compliance manual, Ethan? I am trying to help you scale, Ethan snapped, his facade cracking. You need tech partners. These guys are ready to write a check for the gala sponsorship too. They just want a seat at your table. My table is full, I said, and Larkspur is not for sale. I turned to walk away, but Miranda blocked my path. She had been watching from the sidelines, and she had seen the rejection. She saw Ethan's face, the desperation of a man who had promised something he couldn't deliver. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was hard, her nails digging into my skin. What are you doing? She whispered, her voice trembling with rage. Ethan put his reputation on the line to bring these people here. You are embarrassing him. He is embarrassing himself, I said, pulling my arm free. He is trying to sell access to me. Miranda, I am not a commodity. You are pushing it. Caitlin, she warned. Her eyes were dark, dangerous. You think you are invincible because of this invitation? Let me tell you something. Silvercrest can pull the plug. One word from the board about uncooperative behavior, and you are out. You play ball, or you lose the invite. I looked at her. I looked at the fear behind the threat. She wasn't worried about my invite. She was worried about Ethan's deals collapsing. You have it backward, Miranda, I said quietly. I didn't get the invitation because I played ball. I got it because I refused to play games like this. The invitation came because of integrity. Mislabeled assets, data mining schemes, shell companies. That is how you lose an invitation. If you want to keep yours, I suggest you tell your husband to stop treating the Royal Meridian Trust like a flea market. I walked away. I felt their eyes boring into my back, hot and hateful. I needed air. I stepped out onto the terrace, the cool night air hitting my flushed face. I leaned against the stone railing, trying to slow my heart rate. Psst! I jumped. It was Logan. He was hiding in the shadows of a decorative cypress tree, smoking a cigarette, a habit he had sworn he quit 3 years ago. You okay? He asked, stamping out the cigarette. I have had better Wednesdays, I said. Your brother-in-law is trying to turn my students into data points for a startup. Yeah, about that, Logan said. He looked over his shoulder to make sure the terrace doors were closed. I need to tell you something, and you are going to hate it. Tell me. I was in the locker room earlier, Logan said, keeping his voice low. Ethan was on the phone. He didn't know I was there. He was talking to someone. I think it was that EduStream guy. Or maybe the investor backing them. And? He promised them a seat at the royal table, Logan said. My stomach dropped. What? He told them that he had family clearance, Logan continued. He said that if they put up the sponsorship money for his firm, he would guarantee them FaceTime with Lady Margaret Evans during the dinner. He sold the seat next to you, Caitlin, for $50,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. The seating charts for the gala were sacrosanct. They were arranged by protocol, by diplomatic rank. Ethan wasn't just networking. He was selling proximity to the Royal Meridian leadership without their knowledge. If Lady Margaret found out that a random tech bro was sitting next to her because of a side deal, she wouldn't just be annoyed. She would view it as a security breach. She would cancel the partnership. He is going to blow up the whole thing, I whispered. He is desperate, Logan said. His fund is down 20% this quarter. He needs a win. He thinks he can just swap the place cards when no one is looking. Thank you. Logan, I said. I didn't go back inside. I went straight to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I had a choice. I could confront Ethan again, which would result in more screaming and denial, or I could protect the event. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call the police. I didn't call Silvercrest. I opened the encrypted messaging app that the Royal Meridian security team had asked me to install during the initial vetting process. I typed a message to the head of protocol. Urgent query regarding seating integrity. I have received credible information that unauthorized third parties are being promised specific proximity to the Royal Trust delegation in exchange for financial leverage with local partners. No specific names confirmed, but strongly advise locking down the seating chart and implementing ID checks at the VIP perimeter to prevent unauthorized switches. I hit send. I didn't name Ethan. I didn't name Miranda. I didn't have to. I just shone a light on the risk. The reply came 3 minutes later. Received, Ms. Boyd. We have been monitoring chatter regarding secondary market access attempts. Protocol is already being tightened. The seating chart is now frozen. Any unauthorized attempts to alter the arrangement will result in immediate ejection. Thank you for your discretion. They knew. Monitoring chatter. They knew exactly what Ethan was doing. They were just waiting for him to actually try it so they could catch him in the act. I drove home feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. I had stopped the immediate threat, but I knew the backlash would be severe. Ethan and Miranda were cornered animals now. When I got to my apartment building, it was past midnight. The lobby was empty. I checked my mailbox. A habit born of years of waiting for grant checks. There was only one thing inside, a plain manila envelope, no stamp, no return address. It had been hand-delivered. I carried it upstairs. I locked my door. I turned on every light in the living room before I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a printout of the anonymous email that had been sent to the board, the one accusing me of embezzlement. But someone had taken a thick red marker and written over the text. The handwriting was jagged, angry. You do not belong here. Resign, or we release the rest. My hands shook as I held the paper. Release the rest? There was no rest. There was no scandal. But the threat wasn't about truth. It was about the noise. They were threatening to fabricate something so ugly, so public, that even if I won, I would lose. I looked at the postmark on the back of the printout. There wasn't one, but there was a faint smudge of blue chalk on the corner of the envelope. Billiard chalk, the kind they used in the men's lounge at Silvercrest. I dropped the paper on the table. It wasn't just Miranda anymore. It wasn't just Ethan. The rot in that place went deeper than I thought. They weren't just trying to stop me from speaking. They were trying to scare me into silence. I picked up my phone and took a photo of the letter. I sent it to my lawyer, Marcus. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the city. You want to fight? I whispered to the empty room. Okay, let's fight. I wasn't going to resign. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to walk onto that stage, and I was going to burn their house of cards to the ground with the one thing they couldn't buy, couldn't bribe, and couldn't fake. I was going to tell the truth, and God help anyone who tried to interrupt me. I did not buy a trench coat. I did not hire a private investigator to sit in a sedan with a telephoto lens. Those are the tools of people who watch too many movies. In my line of work, we do not chase shadows in alleyways. We chase data packets through servers. The morning after finding the threatening note in my mailbox, I walked into the Larkspur Alliance office at 7 o'clock. The building was quiet. Save for the hum of the HVAC system, I went straight to the server room, where David, my lead systems architect, was already nursing his third espresso. I need a trace, I said, handing him the manila envelope and the forwarded email from the Silvercrest board. The email was sent via a secure anonymous service, but human error is inevitable. I want to know where the sender was sitting when they hit send. David did not ask questions. He simply cracked his knuckles and began typing. The headers are scrubbed, he muttered after 10 minutes. Standard proton mail encryption. But look at the timestamp. 2:58 in the morning on Tuesday. That is the sender's local time. Now, look at the latency on the handshake with the Silvercrest server. It is negligible. 12 milliseconds. They were local, I said. Very local, David confirmed. I can't give you a street address from the email alone, but I can cross-reference the digital signature of the attachment, the PDF they sent. It wasn't created in the cloud. It was created on a desktop running an outdated version of Adobe Acrobat Pro, licensed to a corporate enterprise key. He ran a query against public metadata registries. It took 40 minutes. I paced the small room, drinking stale coffee, watching the progress bar. Got it, David said. The software license belongs to a subnet registered to the Metro Tower Executive Suites, specifically, the tenant block on the 14th floor. I froze. The Metro Tower was the building where Cross and Partners, Ethan's hedge fund, leased their office space, and the 14th floor was the shared executive lounge and business center, a place where one could access high-speed Wi-Fi without logging into the firm's monitored internal network. Can you pinpoint the device? I asked. Not legally, David said, but I can tell you that the device MAC address has pinged our own public website 300 times in the last week. Whoever this is, they are obsessed with us. They are refreshing our donor page every hour. I didn't need a name. The pattern was the fingerprint. The anonymous email was sent from Ethan's building, using a computer that had been stalking my company's financial page. It was Ethan. But Ethan was a man of numbers, not narratives. He wouldn't care about reputational risk unless someone had whispered the words into his ear. Ethan was the gun, but Miranda was the one aiming it. She was the one who knew the specific language of the country club bylaws. She was the one who knew exactly what kind of rumor would terrify the Silvercrest board. I had the data, but data is not a story. To kill the rumor, I needed undeniable proof of the leak. I needed to catch them in a lie so specific that they could not claim it was a misunderstanding. I decided to set a canary trap, in intelligence circles. A canary trap is when you feed different versions of a sensitive story to different suspects to see which version leaks. Since my suspects were a collective unit, my family, I only needed one version, but it had to be irresistible. I sent a text to the family group chat at noon. Urgent update regarding the gala. Royal Meridian representatives have requested a preliminary compliance meeting with the immediate family tomorrow night. They want to ensure everyone is vetted for the VIP reception. Please meet me at Mom and Dad's house at 6 o'clock. The response was immediate. Miranda replied with a thumbs-up emoji within 30 seconds. Ethan replied, confirmed. My mother sent a string of praying hands. They were terrified of being excluded, and they were desperate for access. It was the perfect leverage. I arrived at my parents' house at 5:55. The atmosphere was thick with anxiety. My mother had put out the good china, as if Lady Margaret herself were coming to tea, even though I had made it clear this was a preparatory briefing. We sat in the living room. Miranda was wearing a dress that looked suspiciously like something she would wear to a job interview. Ethan was tapping his foot, checking his phone every 2 minutes. So, Miranda started, her voice tight. What do they want to know? Do they need our tax returns? Because Ethan's finances are very complex, and we can't just hand over documents without legal review. It is not about finances, I said. Opening my notebook, I kept my face completely neutral. It is about protocol. Lady Margaret is very particular about the inner circle during the event. She wants to ensure that the family understands the security parameters. I paused, looking at each of them. I needed to plant the seed deep. Here is the confidential information, I lied. The Royal Meridian team has secured a private room for a pre-gala toast. It is not on the official schedule. They want to meet us there at 4 o'clock on the day of the event. It is strictly off the record. If word gets out, they will cancel it. Where? Ethan asked. His eyes were hungry. He was already calculating how he could leverage a private toast into a business pitch. The Founders Library, I said. This was the trap. The Founders Library was a small, dusty room on the 3rd floor of the Silvercrest clubhouse. It was almost never used. It was kept locked. And only the general manager had the key. It was the last place anyone would host a VIP reception, which made it perfect if anyone asked about the Founders Library. I would know exactly where they heard it. The Founders Library, Miranda repeated, frowning. That old room upstairs? Why there? Because it is secure, I said. And because it has the original portrait of the club's first president, which is of historical interest to the trust. But you must promise me you cannot tell anyone, not Mr. Sterling, not the committee. If this leaks, the security team pulls the plug. We are not idiots. Caitlin, Miranda snapped. We know how to keep a secret. We are the ones who usually have to clean up your messes, remember? Right, I said. Just make sure. 4 o'clock. The Founders Library. Just us and the royal delegation. Got it, Ethan said. He stopped tapping his foot. He looked like a man who had just been handed a loaded weapon. I left an hour later. As I walked to my car, I felt a deep, profound sadness. Part of me had hoped they would say, "We don't care about the meeting. We just want to support you." Part of me had hoped they would ask about my speech, but they didn't. They only cared about the access. Now, I just had to wait. The next morning, I was in a video conference with our field team in Detroit when my cell phone rang. It was Mr. Sterling, the general manager of Silvercrest. I signaled for my team to continue without me and muted my laptop. Ms. Boyd, Mr. Sterling sounded harassed. I am so sorry to bother you, but I have a rather unusual situation unfolding here at the club, and I wanted to verify it with you before I proceed. What is the problem? Mr. Sterling? I asked. Well, he hesitated. I just received a call from our head of facilities. Apparently, he was approached by a member of the board, who was acting on a tip from a very reliable source. They are demanding that we unlock and deep clean the Founders Library immediately. I closed my eyes. It had taken less than 12 hours. Did they say why? I asked. Yes, Sterling sighed. They claim that there is a secret high-level summit happening there at 4 o'clock on Saturday with the Royal Meridian Trust. The board member was quite irate that he wasn't informed. He wants to set up a catering station in the hallway to intercept the guests. Who was the board member? I asked. It was Mr. Henderson, Sterling said. But he said the information came directly from a family member of the honoree. He said he was promised an introduction if he ensured the room was ready. Mr. Henderson, the man who ran the venture capital firm that Ethan had been trying to impress for months. Mr. Sterling? I said, my voice ice cold. There is no meeting in the Founders Library. The Royal Meridian team will be in the Clarendon suite, as per the official schedule. The information Mr. Henderson received is false. I see, Sterling said, sounding relieved but confused. So it was just a rumor? It was a test, I said. And thank you. Mr. Sterling, you have been very helpful. Please leave the Founders Library locked. I hung up. The trap had snapped shut. Ethan had taken the bait. He had called Henderson immediately after leaving my parents' house. He had tried to trade the secret location for a favor, likely trying to get Henderson to back his failing software deal. And in doing so, he had proven that he was the leak. He was the one feeding information to the board. He was the one who had sent the anonymous email, likely at Miranda's urging, to destabilize my position so they could swoop in and manage the situation. I sat there for a long time. Staring at the phone, I had the IP address, I had the confirmed leak, I had the motive, I had enough evidence to go to the Silvercrest Ethics Committee and have Miranda's membership revoked for conduct unbecoming. I could have Ethan banned from the premises for commercial solicitation. I could destroy them right now, but I didn't want to destroy them in private. I didn't want a quiet expulsion that they could spin into a story about leaving on their own terms. I wanted them to walk into the gala believing they had won. I wanted them to sit in their expensive clothes, thinking they had outsmarted me, thinking they had secured their backroom deals. I wanted them to feel safe, because the truth hits harder when you think you are untouchable. I forwarded the log of Mr. Sterling's call to my personal secure file, adding it to the folder with the IP trace and the anonymous letter. I named the folder The End of the Brunch. Then, another email arrived. It was from Lady Margaret. Dear Caitlin, we have concluded our internal review of the security chatter. We are aware of the interference coming from your local perimeter. Please do not worry. We have adjusted the protocols. However, I am writing to inform you of a change in the program based on the resilience of your organization and the integrity you have shown under this pressure. The Trust has decided to elevate the nature of the evening. You will not simply be giving a keynote speech. At the conclusion of your address, we will be conducting the investiture of the Meridian Seal. This is a lifetime honor usually reserved for heads of state and Nobel laureates. It comes with a permanent endowment for your alliance and a seat on our Global Council. We have not informed the Silvercrest Committee of this change. We want it to be a surprise. See you on Saturday. Margaret. I read the email 3 times. A lifetime endowment. A seat on the Global Council. This wasn't just a career milestone. It was a stratification event. It would put me in a stratosphere that Miranda couldn't reach with a rocket ship. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who realizes that the people trying to trip her were actually just laying out the red carpet. I picked up my phone and sent one final text to the family group chat. Thanks for meeting yesterday. Everything is on track. See you at the gala. I lied. Everything wasn't on track. Everything was about to derail. And for the first time in my life, I was the one driving the train. The investigation was over. The trial was about to begin. And the verdict would be delivered live, under the crystal chandeliers, with nowhere to hide. The 24 hours before the spring gala felt less like a celebration and more like the mobilization phase of a small, disorganized army, while my family turned my parents' living room into a tactical command center for social warfare. I sat in the quiet of my office, finalizing the slide transitions for the impact data visualization. The contrast was almost comical. I was preparing to speak about systemic educational reform to a room full of global power players. They were preparing to walk across a carpet without tripping, both literally and metaphorically. I had stopped by the house to drop off the final parking passes, a courtesy I was not required to extend, but one I offered to maintain the peace. The scene that greeted me was a tableau of high-stakes vanity. My mother, Elaine, was frantically steaming a tuxedo shirt, the hiss of the iron punctuating the tense silence. My father, Robert, stood in front of the hallway mirror, practicing his listening face, a slight tilt of the head, a furrowed brow, a look intended to convey deep engagement with conversations he likely wouldn't understand. And then there was Miranda. She was pacing the rug in a silk robe, her hair set in rollers that made her look like a frantic antenna dish receiving bad signals from outer space. She was holding flashcards, not for a test, but for conversation starters. She was memorizing the names of the Royal Meridian board members, their spouses, and their rumored hobbies. Lord Hemsley breeds horses, she muttered to herself, flipping a card. Ask about the stables in Kentucky. Do not mention the races. He hates gambling. Okay, next, Lady Margaret. Philanthropy chair. Do not mention the scandal with her nephew in 2010. She looked up and saw me standing in the doorway, holding a folder of passes. She didn't say hello. She just stared at my face, which was devoid of makeup and clearly showing the signs of a 60-hour work week. You are wearing concealer tomorrow, right? She asked. The lighting in the ballroom is unforgiving. If you look tired, people will think the charity is failing. I am tired because the charity is succeeding. Miranda, I said, placing the passes on the console table. And I imagine the lighting will be focused on the data screen, not my under-eye circles. She stopped pacing. She put the flashcards down and walked over to me. The aggression that had defined her for the last week, the threats, the sabotage, the snide comments, had evaporated, replaced by a jittery, hollowed-out panic. She looked at me, and for the first time, she didn't look like the older sister. She looked like a child who had realized she hadn't studied for the final exam. Caitlin, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper so our parents wouldn't hear. Can I ask you something, as a sister? That depends on the question, I said, keeping my guard up. Tomorrow night, she started, picking at a loose thread on her robe. When you go up there, when you give your speech, can you just tone it down? I frowned. Tone what down? The scope, she said, struggling to find the words. You know how you start throwing out these big numbers, millions of dollars, global reach. It is very intimidating. It makes you sound so corporate. I am corporate. Miranda, I run a corporation. I know, she rushed on. But for the gala, maybe you could make it more small town? Talk about the local kids. Talk about how much you learned from mom and dad. Make it humble. If you go up there and sound like a CEO, it is going to make the rest of us look well. It is going to make us look small. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. Please, I have spent 5 years building my reputation at this club. If you walk in there and suddenly you are the most powerful person in the room, what does that leave me? I am just the sister who married a hedge fund guy. Give me a little dignity. Let me be the successful one for one more night. I looked at her, stunned by the sheer, naked audacity of the request. She wasn't asking me to lie. She was asking me to shrink. She wanted me to amputate my achievements so she wouldn't have to feel the phantom pain of her own mediocrity. Miranda, I said, my voice steady but cold. I am not going to apologize for my work, and I am certainly not going to hide it. The Royal Meridian Trust didn't invite me to tell heartwarming anecdotes about our childhood. They invited me to present a scalable model for educational equity. The stage chose me. I didn't steal it from you. You are selfish, she hissed, the mask slipping back into place. You have always been selfish. You think you are better than us. No, I said. I just stopped pretending I was worse than you. Before she could scream, a loud crash came from the dining room. We both turned. My father had dropped a glass. But he wasn't looking at the shattered shards on the floor. He was looking at Ethan. Ethan was sitting at the dining table, his phone pressed to his ear, his hand gesturing wildly. He hadn't noticed us. He was deep in a conversation that was clearly going off the rails. I told you, the liquidity is there, Ethan was whispering, but the desperation in his voice carried. It is just tied up in the escrow for the gala sponsorship. Yes, the deal goes through tomorrow night. I just need 24 hours. Don't margin call me now. If you liquidate the position, I lose the leverage for the software contract. He paused, listening to the person on the other end. His face went gray. No, listen to me. I have a lock on the royal table. I have a direct line. I am meeting them in the Founders Library at 4 o'clock. It is a done deal. Just hold the position. He slammed the phone down on the table. Then he looked up and saw Robert standing there. My father's face was unreadable, for years. Robert Boyd had looked at Ethan and seen the golden goose. He had seen the luxury cars and the expensive watches and assumed they were symbols of stability. But now, after seeing my audit, after seeing what real, liquid solvency looked like, he was looking at Ethan and seeing something else entirely. He was seeing a gambler. What did you just say? Robert asked. His voice was very quiet. Nothing, Bob, Ethan said, flashing a smile that looked like a rictus of terror. Just handling some overseas markets. Volatile time of year, you know? You said margin call, Robert said. He took a step closer. And you said you were using the gala sponsorship as escrow. Ethan, is the firm in trouble? The firm is fine, Ethan snapped, standing up. It is just cash flow. It is standard operating procedure. You wouldn't understand the complexity of these instruments. I understand that you just tried to trade a meeting in a library for an extension on a loan, Robert said. I understand that you are betting money you don't have on a deal that Caitlin already rejected. I didn't reject it, Ethan shouted, glancing at me. I am going to fix it. Once I get those guys in the room with Lady Margaret, it is all going to work out. We just need to get through tomorrow. So it is a trade, Robert said. He sounded tired, defeated. The whole thing, the donation, the sponsorship, it is all just to cover a hole in your balance sheet. It is leverage, Ethan yelled. It is a lie, Robert said. He turned away, walking to the window. I thought you were a builder. Ethan, I thought you were building a future for my daughter. But you are just shuffling debt. Elaine! Miranda shouted, running into the room. Make them stop. Dad is being mean to Ethan. We have to be united for tomorrow. If we are fighting, everyone will see. My mother bustled in, wringing her hands, looking between her husband and her son-in-law. She fell back on the only strategy she knew, toxic peacemaking. Robert, please, she begged. Not now. Ethan is under a lot of pressure. And Caitlin, why do you have to antagonize them? Look what you're doing. You're upsetting everyone. I haven't said a word. Mom, I said from the doorway. But your presence, she said, tears welling up. Ever since this invitation came, everything has fallen apart. Why couldn't you just decline it? For the sake of the family. Miranda is your sister. You know how much this club means to her. Couldn't you have just let her have this? I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but it wasn't the old ache of rejection. It was the pain of severing a limb that had been gangrenous for too long. You want me to decline a lifetime achievement honor so Miranda can feel important at a brunch? I asked. I want us to be a family. My mother sobbed. I want us to be happy. We were never happy, Mom. Logan's voice cut through the room. We all turned. Logan was standing in the kitchen doorway. He was eating an apple, leaning against the doorframe with a look of absolute exhaustion. Logan, don't start, Miranda warned. No, let's finish, Logan said. He took a bite of the apple and chewed slowly. We weren't happy. We were just pretending. We were pretending Ethan was a genius. We were pretending Miranda was a queen. And we were pretending Caitlin was a loser. So we didn't have to feel bad about how shallow we are. Shut up, Miranda screamed. It was a raw, ugly sound. You are just jealous because I am the one who carried this family. I am the one who married well. I am the one who got us into Silvercrest. I have carried the weight of everyone's expectations for 10 years. And now she just waltzes in with her little email and steals it all? It is not fair. Steals what? I asked. Stepping into the room. I am not taking your membership, Miranda. I am not taking your house. I am not taking your husband. What exactly am I stealing from you? My status, she screamed. Tears were streaming down her face now, ruining the expensive facial she had gotten that morning. If you are up there, if you are the one the Royal Trust cares about, then who am I? I am nothing. I am just nobody. The room fell silent. The truth was finally out on the table, ugly and breathing. She didn't hate me because I had failed. She hated me because my success rendered her entire identity, which was built on being better than Caitlin, obsolete. I looked at her. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt pity. You don't need to be better than me to have value. Miranda, I said softly, you could have just been my sister. But you chose to be my competition. And the problem with making me your enemy is that eventually, I decided to win. I turned to my father. I am leaving. I will see you at the gala. Or I won't. It is your choice. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I just closed it firmly on the chaos. I drove back to my apartment in silence. My phone buzzed halfway there. It was a secure message from the Royal Meridian Compliance Team. I pulled over to read it. Ms. Boyd, per your request, we ran a tertiary screen on the corporate entities associated with Mr. Ethan Cross, specifically regarding the proposed EduStream sponsorship. We have confirmed that the sponsorship funds are being routed through a holding company that has been flagged for securities fraud in 2 states. Furthermore, the sponsorship appears to be structured as a quid pro quo for access to our delegation. This is a direct violation of the Royal Meridian Transparency Accord. We are not canceling the event. However, we will be implementing a hard block on any interaction between our delegation and Mr. Cross or his associates. Security has been briefed. If he attempts to approach the head table or the founder's library, he will be removed. We look forward to your speech. It is going to be a clarifying evening. I put the phone down. Ethan was walking into a buzzsaw. He was going to show up at the founder's library at 4 o'clock, thinking he was about to save his career. Instead, He was going to find a locked door and a security team that knew exactly who he was. And Miranda was going to walk into that ballroom expecting to manage me, expecting to hush me, expecting to salvage her brand. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't look tired anymore. I looked like someone who was done running. I drove the rest of the way home. I laid out my dress. Not a designer gown, but a structured, elegant piece I had bought with my own money. I laid out my speech. I laid out the impact report. I went to sleep at 10 o'clock. I slept soundly. The next morning, the day of the gala, the sun rose bright and cold. I drank my coffee. I did my yoga. I answered a few emails from my staff. At 5 o'clock, the limousine sent by the Royal Meridian Trust arrived at my building. It wasn't the family van my mother had wanted. It was a solitary black car with diplomatic plates. I got in. "To Silvercrest, Miss Boyd?" the driver asked. "Yes," I said, looking out the window as the city began to blur past. "To Silvercrest." I had two things in my hands: my speech, which would change the future of my organization, and the truth, which would shatter the past of my family. I knew that by the time the dessert course was served, one person in our family would be exposed as a fraud, and it wouldn't be me. They had wanted a show. Tonight, they were going to get one. The spring gala at Silvercrest Country Club was designed to be intimidating. It was a sensory assault of velvet drapes, towering floral arrangements of white hydrangeas, and the kind of heavy, expensive perfume that smells like old money and judgment. The ballroom was packed with 400 people: senators, tech moguls, and the social elite of the state, all gathered under chandeliers that looked like frozen explosions of crystal. I walked in through the side entrance, escorted by the Royal Meridian security detail. I was wearing a deep emerald gown, structured and simple, with no jewelry except for a small pin on my lapel, the emblem of the Larkspur Alliance. My family had arrived 20 minutes earlier. I saw them near the center of the room. Miranda was smiling, but it was a terrifying expression. Her skin was pulled tight, her eyes darting around the room like a radar system tracking incoming missiles. She was clinging to Ethan's arm, but Ethan looked like a man who was waiting for a trapdoor to open beneath his feet. I knew why. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, Ethan had gone to the Founders Library, expecting to meet Lady Margaret Evans to close his secret sponsorship deal. Instead, he had found a locked door and two large men in earpieces who politely but firmly escorted him back to the parking lot, informing him that the area was restricted. He knew he had been burned, but he didn't know how badly until tonight. I took my seat at the head table, directly to the right of Lady Margaret Evans. The seating chart had held firm. There were no tech investors next to me. There were no sticky engagement data miners, just the director of the Royal Trust and the governor of the state. When Miranda saw where I was sitting, I saw her physically deflate. She was at table 12, a perfectly respectable table near the back, sandwiched between a retired dentist and the club's landscaping contractor. The distance between us wasn't just physical. It was a canyon of status that no amount of mimosa toasts could bridge. The lights dimmed. The chatter died down. Lady Margaret stood up to the podium. She was a woman of 60, with silver hair and a voice that could cut glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "tonight, we talk about the future. We talk about investment, but not the kind that yields a quarterly dividend. We talk about the investment in human capital." She paused, looking out over the room. "Usually, the Royal Meridian Trust operates in the background. We fund, we support, we remain silent. But this year, we found a model so compelling, so rigorously ethical and scalable, that we felt compelled to break our own protocol. We are not just here to donate, we are here to learn." She turned slightly, extending a hand toward me. "Please welcome the architect of the Larkspur Learning Alliance and the newest member of our Global Strategy Council, Ms. Caitlin Boyd." The applause was polite at first, then it grew. As I stood up, Lady Margaret did something that made the room gasp. She didn't just shake my hand. She stepped down from the podium and presented me with a heavy, velvet-lined box. She opened it. Inside lay the Meridian seal, a medallion of gold and lapis lazuli. "For integrity and leadership," Lady Margaret said into the microphone, "and for building a lighthouse in a storm." The room stood up. It wasn't a choice. It was a wave. The governor stood, the senators stood, and slowly, painfully, Table 12 stood. I looked at Miranda. She was clapping, but her face was a mask of absolute shock. She was watching the people she had idolized for years, the people whose approval she craved like oxygen, giving a standing ovation to the sister she had called embarrassing 3 days ago. In that moment, the narrative flipped. I wasn't Miranda Boyd's sister anymore. Miranda Boyd was now just the woman related to Caitlin. I walked to the podium. I placed my notes on the stand, but before I could speak, there was a commotion near the side stage. Ethan was trying to move. He was signaling frantically to someone in the back, presumably the investors he had promised access to. He was trying to catch the eye of the announcer, trying to get a mention, trying to salvage the deal that was crumbling in his hands. Lady Margaret saw him. She didn't flinch. She leaned into the microphone, her voice dropping to a register of deadly calm. "Before Ms. Boyd speaks," Lady Margaret said, "I have one administrative note. The trust prides itself on absolute transparency. It has come to our attention that unauthorized promises were made to certain commercial entities regarding access to this evening's delegation." The room went dead silent. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. "Let me be clear," Lady Margaret continued. "The Royal Meridian Trust does not sell seats. We do not barter influence, and we do not partner with organizations that view children as data points. As of this evening, we have formally severed all potential ties with the EduStream initiative and its local brokering partners due to a failure of ethical compliance." She didn't say Ethan's name. She didn't have to. Every eye in the room turned to him. He was standing halfway out of his chair, frozen, his face a beacon of guilt. The investors he had brought, the men in the shiny suits, stood up and walked out. They didn't look at Ethan. They just left. Miranda looked at her husband. She looked at the empty chairs where his big deal had been sitting, and then she looked at the room, looking at them. For 10 years. Miranda had feared being embarrassed by me. She had feared I would wear the wrong shoes or say the wrong thing. But in the end, it was the husband she had chosen for his success who had humiliated her in front of the entire city. She sank back into her chair, covering her face with her hand. I took a breath. I looked out at the sea of tuxedos and gowns. I could have used that moment to twist the knife. I could have made a joke about family values. I could have gloated. But as I looked at my parents, who were sitting beside Miranda looking small and old, I realized I didn't want blood. I wanted change. "Thank you, Lady Margaret," I said. My voice was steady, amplified through the speakers, filling every corner of the room. 8 years ago, I began. I sat at a kitchen table with a laptop and a question. I asked myself why opportunity looked so much like a lottery ticket. Why did some children get a golden ticket, while others got a closed door? I didn't talk about my family. I didn't talk about the country club. I talked about the work. I talked about the girl in rural Ohio who learned to code on a refurbished tablet and now runs a cybersecurity firm. I talked about the boy who used our literacy program to get a scholarship that saved him from the foster care system. I used data. I used numbers. I spoke the language of investment, but I gave it a soul. "We often confuse value with price," I said, looking directly at Table 12. "We think that if something costs a lot, it must be worth a lot. We think that a membership card defines our worth, but the most valuable things in this world, integrity, impact, the ability to lift someone else up, cannot be bought. They must be built." I paused. "And they must be defended." The room was silent, not the polite silence of boredom, but the heavy silence of reflection. "Tonight," I concluded, "I am not asking for your money. Larkspur is fully funded for the next 5 years, thanks to the trust, but I am asking for your action. I gestured to the screen behind me. A map appeared, a map of the city, with red dots marking the underfunded schools within 5 miles of the Silvercrest gates. I am announcing the launch of the Boyd Community Scholars Program, I said. Starting tomorrow, Larkspur will be partnering with the local district to provide full-ride mentorships for 50 students. I looked at Mr. Sterling, the general manager, who was standing by the door. And we are inviting Silvercrest Country Club to be the host site for their graduation ceremony. Not as a donor, but as a neighbor. It is time to open the gates, not just for those who can pay, but for those who will lead. I stepped back. For a second, nothing happened. Then, my father stood up. He was crying. He clapped his hands, hard, loud, rhythmic. Then Logan stood up. Then Lady Margaret. And then, the whole room was on its feet again. I walked off the stage. I didn't go back to the head table. I walked straight to table 12. Ethan was gone. He had slipped out the back door, unable to face the wreckage of his ego. But Miranda was there. She was sitting alone, her hands in her lap, the applause washing over her. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red. The mask was gone. The Silvercrest member was gone. There was just a sister who had spent her whole life running a race she couldn't win. "I am sorry," she whispered. It wasn't a dramatic speech. It was barely audible. "I wanted to be important," she said, her voice shaking. "I just wanted what you have, not the money, the weight. You matter. Caitlin, you actually matter. And I occupy space." She looked down at her hands. "Ethan used me. He used this club, and I let him because I thought it made us look powerful. I was so stupid." I reached out and took her hand. It was cold. "You are not nothing, Miranda," I said. "But you have to stop trying to be everything to everyone else. You have to start being something for yourself." "Can we go?" she asked, tears spilling over. "Please, I can't stay here. I can't look at these people." "Yeah," I said. "Let's go." I signaled to my parents and Logan. We didn't stay for the dessert. We didn't stay for the networking. We walked out of the ballroom, a strange, disjointed phalanx. As we walked through the lobby, Mr. Sterling tried to stop us. "Mrs. Boyd, Ms. Boyd, the press is waiting, the photographers." "Tell them I will send a press release in the morning," I said, not slowing down. We walked out into the cool night air. The valet brought the cars. My diplomatic limo was waiting. But I waved it off. "I will ride with you guys," I said to my father. We piled into my dad's sedan. It was tight. It smelled like old leather and mints. It was the car we used to take to church when we were kids. Nobody said anything for a long time. The silence wasn't angry anymore. It was the silence of a fever breaking. "That was quite a speech," my father said, watching the road. "Thanks, Dad," I said. "Ethan is going to have a lot of explaining to do," Logan said from the back seat, looking out the window. "To the SEC and to us." "He is not coming back to the house tonight," Miranda said quietly. "I told him to go to a hotel." She looked at me. "The scholarship, the Boyd Scholars, you named it after the family?" "I did," I said. "Even after everything we said?" she asked. "Even after I tried to, after what I did?" "I didn't do it for you, Miranda," I said gently. "I did it because the name Boyd shouldn't be associated with a country club membership. It should mean something else. I am redefining the brand." She laughed. It was a watery, weak sound, but it was real. "Redefining the brand? God, you are annoying." "I am the boss," I said. "I get to be annoying." We drove past the gates of Silvercrest. I looked back at the clubhouse on the hill, glowing like a palace in the dark. It looked small from here. It looked like a dollhouse. The royal invitation was in my purse. The gold seal was heavy. But as I sat there, squeezed between my brother and my sister, listening to the hum of the tires on the pavement, I realized that the invitation hadn't been a ticket into their world. It had been the exit strategy from it. I had spent my whole life trying to get a seat at their table, only to realize that the table was rotten. So I built my own, and for the first time in 10 years, as we drove into the dark, uncertain night, I felt like my family might actually be ready to sit at it. We weren't fixed, we weren't perfect, but we were awake, and for tonight, that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Emma Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city, a quiet countryside, or maybe even your own founder's library? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing Caitlin take back her power with grace and intelligence, please smash that like button, hit the hype button to help this story reach more people, and don't forget to subscribe to Emma Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. See you in the next video.